Hi, this is Ken Scott, and you're listening to Fab 4 Free for All.
And welcome to another edition of the Fab 4 Free for All, the all Beatles and Beatles related talk show on the internet. They call it a podcast, and I don't see any of us in a pod, but that's what it's supposed to be. Anyway.
And we're also a video cast also on YouTube.
Yeah, well, it's a video podcast or video blog, or I don't know what it is. But either way, I'm your host, Tony Chiguardo, your moderator for this evening's episode. And joining me, as they always do, and for this I am grateful, are my good friends, Mr. Mitch Axelrod.
Hey, folks.
And Mr. Rob Leonard.
Hello, all. How are you?
Do you think all or Screwdriver or any other? Anyway. So
hello, Screwdriver. I would like a screwdriver.
We should all just be doing the show and drinking some cocktails.
Yes,
or smoking cigars if you're doing
Scotch.
it based on this film that we're talking about. We are on this episode talking about part 2. I almost kind of want to say film number 2. You know, I mean, they broke it down into parts, but each part is so long. It's almost kind of like these would be a feature length movie. So.
That's one of the reasons we're doing these shows as individual shows, right? Because they are so long.
Yeah.
And you know us, if we did it all at once, we'd have a 10-hour podcast.
It'd be a 10-hour show, yeah. But no, we're actually looking at the Peter Jackson Get Back film, and the last episode we talked about part 1. We're looking at part 2, and this is like really fun because he actually when we last left our heroes.
Well, Tony, when I first started the movie, I expected like last time on the Beatles Get Back, George Harrison left the band and the other 3 had to figure out what to do.
What will they do? What will they do?
The Riddler.
Exactly what I thought.
Exactly.
The Riddler has George trapped. And anyway, but this part starts on obviously kind of a difficult note. They're telling us about the meeting that occurred from when we last left off with looking at the Beatles working away at Twickenham. And George left on the Friday. They meet with George over the weekend. The meeting does not go well. Monday comes, quote, day 8. And Ringo walks in first to Twickenham Studios where they are working. You got to love dear Mal Evans, who is still trying to be chipper and cheerful and greets the day with a smile. God love him. I'm gonna start right in with my unique brand of Michael Lindsay Hogg comments by just saying, it's frustrating because you're sitting talking with Ringo, or he's sitting talking with Ringo. Why does he have to just tell Ringo, who's just walked in the door, I spoke to Neil and Neil said no one's coming?
Yeah.
It's like the first thing you get out of the guy. I spoke to Neil. Neil said no one's coming.
Well, and maybe Michael thought he'd go home early that day.
Maybe.
Which they did eventually.
Yeah, I guess so. But they're sitting talking. I love the fact that someone comes in with flowers. That's for George Harrison.
Yeah.
I think it would be from the Beatles like they did for Ringo when he left and decorated his drums,
Yeah, that was the first thing that I thought, But and you have to wonder like whether he was doing deadpan humor, but Ringo, he says, well, who's it from? And Ringo says it's from Hare Krishna. And Michael says, Harry who?
Yeah, and those people. But he said,
those people, which is a good.
But it's kind of funny and I had that in my notes too. Flowers from the Hare Krishna, not even the Beatles. Like you'd think, but then again, the Beatles knew that the meeting didn't go well. So
yeah. So sorry you quit your job, George. Now join us, full time, the Hare Krishnas.
Well, also Ringo then, like really right afterwards, admits he didn't like India, which was such a throwaway quote.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of throwaway quotes in the second half, or the second part, I should say.
Now, they talk about the meeting not going well. And when Paul arrives a few minutes later with Linda, they talk about the fact that Yoko, Paul comments this as well. Yoko was speaking for John, not said with any bitterness or he just says it very matter of factly. Yoko is speaking for John, and then says, well, and then George left the meeting, and those two phrases are not one right after the other, but they're tied together. Do you think one of the things that was frustrating George was essentially just the communication breakdown within the band?
You know what, Tony? Did he say that? Let's get it right. Did he say John? I thought he said Yoko was talking for John when they tried. Well, I guess they couldn't reach John that morning, so no one was talking. All right, so it must have been a meeting.
I think it was during the meeting.
In my head.
No, it was the meeting.
Yeah, because that's definitely the way it comes off. Right. That's the way it's edited to appear.
Right.
So I assume that's what it was, but and then George left. He's not kind of like, it's not a George left because of Yoko, but do you think that George was starting to see the communication breakdown?
No, I think George was just fed up with everything. I mean, it was festering and he just, he left, but I think we actually discussed that in part one, but as far as this, I think it's telling in a couple of ways. The first 10, 15 minutes, Ringo shows up. He's the only one. And God bless him, like you said, he's ready for work. He always is. Even in a hard day's night, I'm dying for a bit of work.
Yes.
And he still is. And then Paul shows up. And like you said, he talks about John and Yoko, but he defends Yoko a lot.
Very much so.
Yes, he does.
Very much so.
And that's very telling too, because he never ever really badmouths her at all during this whole film.
Nope. When I used to do Beatle lectures, I still do, but when I used to lecture a lot specifically about this era, about the Get Back era, I used to play that segment of quotes of Paul's comments a lot. People were surprised by it and would appreciate it. That's what.
Yeah, because you always got the feeling that, they were at odds.
Yeah.
But he's not, at least in January of 1969, he's not.
Yeah.
Well, also he does mention that if John's going to pick Yoko or the Beatles, he's picking Yoko.
Right.
So he sees what's going on with John, his friend, one of his best friends. And, I think that's part of it also, that, he doesn't want to push John away, because if he does, he's going right with Yoko and, leaving the band.
Yeah.
Which is eventually what happened in many ways.
He's in a catch-22, Paul.
Right.
He wants to be with John, meaning in the Beatles, but he also, you could tell he wants John to be happy.
Right.
He's genuine about that the whole time. But he's in that catch-22, and then I hate to say it again, but Michael Lindsay Hogg instigates by saying, John told me the other day that he didn't want to be in the Beatles anymore. And I'm like, why do you need to say that?
But you know what? Yeah. I thought, the first part, he was all over the place. I thought the second part, he wasn't as all over the place.
No, he's definitely not as present.
And that's a good thing.
But you want to know something, guys? We've talked about it. He's a director. And there's one point in this part where he does say, I'm the captain of the ship. But he quotes, that's a quote. But, we've talked about it, Tony, offline. For a director, you don't see Orson Welles, and I don't mean to say Orson Welles, but he, obviously.
I know what you're saying.
But you don't see any director, Cecil B. DeMille, you don't see them in their own movie. All right. He's supposed to be directing. Get behind the camera and direct. Don't be in the film so much.
Well, you're not behind the camera, but it's, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? I'm just saying, not in front of the camera. I know it's a documentary, but I've never seen a director in the film that he's supposed to be directing, unless you're Alfred Hitchcock and you make that little brief thing and everything.
Yeah.
But,
but it's a different type of film, Mitch. It's
I understand.
But the thing is, he's like sort of part of it, whether they wanted him in that position in front of the camera discussing things. I'm not really sure. But if he was behind the camera saying, okay, get this shot, a lot of it was shot as B-roll. We noticed a lot in this part too. There's a lot of things where, it's like, okay, he's saying, make sure you're still recording and still filming.
But what? So
it's a little different because he is part of they don't know what to present, and he's trying to help them come through with something.
In a way, yeah, but it's still that idea that, you know, as I mentioned in the first go round, that, you know, the role of, and again, I fault the Beatles themselves in a way, the role of a director needs to be determined by the producers. The Beatles were the producers, and yeah, I don't know if they said to Michael, you know, jump in every 15 minutes or so and tell us where you think we might want to have the program. You know what I mean?
I doubt that.
But you know, I mean, I guess in a way it's hard, because could they have done this the way they did Magical Mystery Tour and had Paul directed themselves? I don't know. I mean, I think if they'd gotten a bunch of cameras set up and had competent camera people, but, you know, Rob, to a comment you made in the last part, we were talking about, is it 50 hours? How many hours of material? 50 to 60 hours, whatever it is.
Right.
Is that unique material? But even if you think about it, if it is 50 or 60 hours of unique material, that's still 50 or 60 hours spread out over however many
22 days.
22 days. Well,
That's
were they
2 hours
filming?
and 28 minutes?
They're not. Are they filming for? Yeah, they're filming for 22 days, right? So that's like Mitch said,
a little
that's
over 2 hours,
2 hours and 40 minutes per day that was being filmed. So while we're thinking, oh my God, the Beatles were filmed for a whole month. Yeah, sure, the Beatles didn't know when film was running, but the reason why I think we're seeing all of this off sync stuff is because there really isn't that much footage to work with.
I agree with you. I think
how much they worked.
Right. Considering how much they worked. I mean, people are like, oh my God, 50, 60 hours, that's mind blowing. Well, it's far less than what we have on audio, you know, if you think about it, which is interesting, because there's, you know, commonality there in terms of what they were syncing or recording. But we have much more, I think, on audio than 55 hours, probably.
No, I agree. And you know, that's the way Niagara reels work. You know, it records the area and the film. The film didn't always have to be running. You know, there's parts of this, especially the second part, they have the camera on Paul for like a really long time where you expect it to cut. But since it wasn't being made that way, at least I thought, at least for parts 1 and 2, you can see where, okay, here's you know, where we might have to match that movement or slow it down or whatever they did to make it look like they were talking when they really weren't on that piece of Niagara reel. Right. So I think that's part of it. I think, you know, it's just crazy to think about it. You know, sometimes you think about this as, what happens if we didn't have the video and we just had the Niagara reels?
That's kind of what we had for like 30 years, Rob.
Yeah, I know, but you know what I mean. I mean, they've cleaned up the Niagara reels also. They have, but the video does help. You know, there's a better understanding of these sessions now.
Oh, definitely. Project, hell yeah.
With the video, with the film, I should say. We should say film because that's what it is. But at the same time, it's very, it's different how we looked at it before, and now we're sort of changing our minds a little bit. Definitely. Well, the general public is changing their minds also. It's not just us.
We're still in that little space with Paul and with, you know, them talking before John and Yoko arrive. And it's very interesting because, you know, Paul is being not only very accommodating, but he's also being, I would say, very self-insightful. There's that great comment about him being asked about writing songs with John. And he says, it's very funny now. I start writing songs and I start to write songs about white walls, you know. And again, he doesn't say it with any meanness, but he says,
everybody laughs, but he doesn't.
No, he doesn't, because he's being honest. He's being very brutally honest. And again, not saying anything bad. What he's trying to say is that, you know, he knows that John and Yoko are in their avant-garde phase. He knows that Yoko is a conceptual performance artist, and et cetera. And he's just like, well, I want to write songs about, or I start to write songs about white walls because I think that's what's going to please them.
Right. That's the way they want me to write, but they don't.
And he says, but the truth is, I know they don't, or they wouldn't, you know?
Right.
So Paul actually realizes that this whole thing is sort of playing little mind games with him. They're not playing mind games with him, but this whole scenario is really messing with his head. And he says, for them to be able to compromise, I have to be able to compromise first. And it's stupid if none of us compromise, And then he makes that infamous comment about how they could potentially end the TV show. And, this just in, Beatles break up, with the news bureaus. And one thing that's missing from that, and I may mention this in the last show, but is the fact that Linda, Michael Lindsay Hogg responds with, "Oh, that's nice," meaning, well, oh, that's great TV,
right? Drama
for this just in, Beatles break up. Oh, that's nice, and Linda just jumps on. No, that's not nice. That's absolutely not nice, and she just gets right, And you sort of hear Paul going like, "Whoa, calm down, love. We're not really going to do it." But and then there's the and then there were two comment from
Paul. Wait for that comment.
But first he says about the breakup 50 years, before he says, and then there were two.
Yeah,
he
Yoko
says it'd be silly if in 50 years they say the Beatles broke up because Yoko sat on them.
Right.
And then, but I think then there were two. I think even in 1969, and I'm going to praise Michael Lindsay Hogg right now, or whoever was behind the camera, I think they knew that was a really big statement because they focused on Paul the whole time. And it wasn't just a still shot. It was, 30 seconds or 45 seconds?
And
Paul's of them just focusing on him, and he's obviously wet-eyed. He gets wet-eyed, and Ringo wipes his eyes too. They cut to Ringo.
Yeah, they cut to Ringo, and Ringo broke, obviously.
Yeah, and then there were two, and to me, that was the most dramatic part of Beatle video I've ever seen. Probably.
I thought that long stare at Paul, where he's staring away.
Yeah,
he's not looking at anyone else. He's almost thinking this, and maybe I don't think maybe for the first time, but at that time we are seeing it from our angle as viewers. So I felt very bad for Paul in that scene because he always wanted to keep the Beatles together out of all of them, and I think he knew how much they meant to him. And he also knew how talented they were, the four of them together. That has to be the four of them. I think that he always realized that out of the four of them. And so I think that was part of it. The thing about Linda, when she says no, think about this. She's the only one who saw him as a fan.
Yep.
And she knows the power of the Beatles.
But is she a bigger fan than Michael, though? Anyway.
Michael,
funny.
That would be a good battle royal going on.
I think she would
versus Linda.
I think she would have kicked his ass.
I see.
She's a New York chick. Linda would have clobbered him.
Taking that cigar and.
So I thought that 30-second bit was really touching, and it was. And I'm glad it was in the beginning of the film and not the middle, because obviously they're doing sequential, so it would have been there anyway. But they could have had that at the end of part one, sure. Make that the end point of part one. Just Paul staring away.
When Mal or whomever, I think it's Mal, comes over after and taps Paul on the shoulder after that 40 seconds or whatever of drama.
John's on the phone.
You want to talk to John's on the phone. You want to talk to him. Paul jumps out of the chair.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. So it's great because he knows, wow, all right, John's going to be here. Because they said John's coming in whatever in about an hour, after Paul comes back. And so, and you could see the relief.
Yeah.
John's going to be in about an hour. And that's like, wow. Okay. And it breaks that total tension. And it's kind of cool because you could, again, they love each other, these guys. I mean, forget about all the crap they went through or going through, even with George. It's great though that he jumps up and he's like, yeah, I'll talk to John. You know, he could be like, oh, just see what he wants, you know.
Yeah.
But because he could be mad. You know how we all get when we get mad. I don't want to talk to him. But he's not that way. So it's kind of
not me. I'm filled with love.
Yeah, I know. You have love. I thought there was I thought the way Peter cut the beginning of this part was wonderful.
Tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so too.
But it was interesting, though. He included, there's that line too where, you know, and again, as the director and again, being told whatever his boundaries are or not, Michael Lindsay Hogg saying, well, I've got to keep saying you're wrong when I think you're wrong. And then Paul sort of responds in kind, well, you know, but we've talked about sort of, you know, what you were saying was one of the heaviest video moments, but now we go to one of the heaviest audio segments because it's really just audio.
Yeah.
But I will say this, having watched that segment probably 4 times at this point, there's still a bit of vagary and talking over each other. And there's still some things you really don't quite know where they're going. It's appreciative that you get the full conversation. But it's and I appreciate that Jackson did it. I appreciate, though, underhanded it was MLH putting the microphone in the flower pot in the first place. But
that is the sign of a good director, though.
Sure.
He got the gig.
Well, a good director of a documentary.
Yes, he's not. He didn't get the gig because, you know, he slept with someone. He got the gig because he was doing good work. So
he had been doing
put that out there. Yeah, we're not killing him just for the sake of killing him.
No,
you know, I mean, when he deserves praise, we definitely give it to him.
But I stand by the fact that he sucked in that first bit. Anyway,
opinion.
You know, the whole flower pot thing is interesting. Paul is telling John that he's the boss.
Yeah, nice.
Outright, you're the boss. Yeah. You know, and then saying, well, I'm secondary boss, or I'm second in command, essentially. And then it's telling of John to say, I feel guilty about our relationship, is a line in there.
Yeah.
Yep. Going forward, does it seem as though John does anything about that? Do you think there's an active shift in John after that?
I think I think for me personally, I think there's a shift in both of them. I definitely think in part 2, John is totally in the group. I mean, so in the group, the most I've seen it in a while. I mean, totally, you know, interested in everything going on, joking to try to get everybody, you know, to do what he needs to do and what they need to do. He doesn't seem like he's on anything, even though he tells in the beginning that, you know,
he's probably not. But that second day when he's talking about having been recovering from the night before.
Yes. Well, he says, I've been abusing my body. And Paul says, hey,
some of his mental meanderings are a little,
but
they're John, but they're
okay.
Cranky.
Let me put it another way. He seems very happy. He seems,
for the most part, absolutely
very invested in the group, no matter what. He's joking. He breaks the fourth wall, you know, a lot by doing fun stuff. You know,
the rolling bones, introducing,
and even just little jokes he does right to the camera, or he'll look at the camera and go, uh-huh. But so this part, he is he's John of the Beatles, not John of John and Yoko.
Beatles, right?
You know, Yoko's there.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, I also think that meeting is, to me, some of the most important audio we've ever heard between John and Yoko. I mean, John and Paul.
Agreed.
Because it's so personal. It's so on target at the moment, but also that, you know, when John, you know, when Paul says you were the boss, you know, John says, well, there were times when you were helping me out writing a song and I didn't like where the song went. So I'm saying, what's he talking about? Paul helped him so many times writing a song. And I always thought made it better. So,
and there was implication from John about saying like, well, I was afraid to.
But, you know, Paul McCartney, and he said, sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong.
Right. Right. I mean, it's kind of like,
he said most of the times you're right. He does say that.
And it's also, again, when you talk about ego, it's an indication of John's frailty too.
Of course.
Yeah. As much as I'm freaking John Lennon, it's John's fragile ego that's saying, I was scared of you. He just, he's your partner, and you brought him into the band, dude.
Imagine if John is scared of him. George was probably, scared, not scared, but looked up to John. Yeah. And then both of them were, they admit in the conversation between the two of them that that they've not screwed George over, but just not been as invested in him or,
invested the time in him. Yeah. They'd always spend less time on his stuff. And, even though we had 3 songs on Revolver and standout songs on Pepper and the White Album, what this also reminded me of? Remember when we did our show where Paul wasn't on the singles?
Yeah.
That conversation in the movie reminded me, like, was Paul the one who pulled away about making sure that he had an A or a B side? Because he didn't for a couple of singles as we did that show. And I thought about that also because, Get Back, okay, they put that out. George, at the end of the movie, part 2, he said, hey, this should be out. We should put it out right now. And they put it out in April, so it was pretty quick. But at the same time, then Ballad of John and Yoko comes out when Get Back's still on the charts. And then, Come Together and Something. And so, Paul isn't on the singles for a couple of singles, which was so odd and different. So I don't know if they connect, but I can see that connecting more, that Paul's knows. And even in part 1, when Paul says, hey, I don't want to be bossing you guys around, he's almost recognizing that his fault might be being a little bossy. But at this, but the
he
same
says,
time,
I'm afraid to do it on camera.
But the conversation with John was, 2 guys who didn't know they were being recorded. And I thought it was a very straight ahead conversation. And it'd be nice to get Paul's reaction to it, which we haven't heard because we haven't really heard Paul talk about the movie. But then again, I always thought that 3-2-1 thing he did with Rick Rubin, he had, I think, seen parts of this footage because he kept talking about how I was sometimes annoying to people in the band.
But what, Rob? I think this conversation, again, 2 friends who don't know they're being recorded, being honest with each other, and Paul admits to a lot of, I know. And John also says, he says some things like, you've been bossy, you've been this, but I've also, like every time he comes at Paul, and I don't mean comes at Paul because it's not a mouth.
No, but every time he takes
a dig at Paul, he then takes it back a minute and says, but I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah, he pulls it back on himself.
Right. And then when they were talking about George, they definitely came to the agreement that both of them were guilty in terms of George. And Paul said, I know I've told George, just play it like this, blah, 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 instead of saying to George, what do you think? And he goes, but, we've got to get stuff done. And so they understand what's going on. They do. They're very cognizant of how they've been treating George. They just didn't know it was manifesting, in the way it was to the point of George leaving. Now, they did say in the conversation, I think John said, George has been going through this has been festering for a long time. He used the word festering.
Yeah.
So, so they are aware that they've been doing this for years and years. They just didn't think that in January of '69, it would come out to the point where he would leave.
Right.
Right.
No, very good point.
But it's a very, very telling conversation.
Yeah.
Wow.
To me, this, I think, changes books that have been written, not just about these sessions, but of the last year of the Beatles, because it was touching. At the same time, it was direct. It wasn't beating around the bush. There was a lot of honesty there between 2 longtime friends about another longtime friend.
Yeah,
I thought it was really like, wow. You wish you'd known about this earlier.
It was constructive. It really was constructive because at the end, though, Paul's typical Paul, and he says, his typical like thumbs up. Well, we'll just George will come back.
Yeah, George will come back.
Just plan on George will come back.
Yeah, we'll just plan on George will come back.
Well, that's Paul being positive. He's always more positive than negative.
They find out. I'm going to kind of spin us ahead a little bit because we kind of, which is good. We got bogged down on a fairly not bogged down.
That's an important part.
No, that's an important part. To me, that so far out of the two parts we've reviewed, to me that section was so important about what this whole thing's about, and this is such an insight into their friendship, their working capabilities together, the fact that they do like each other, and but at the same time they you just can't roll over, and
right.
I think that's part of it.
Well, they find out that George isn't coming till Wednesday. He's going to Liverpool to go visit relatives. And then on that first day, or that Monday, you get a run through of Get Back. They finally add in Tucson, Arizona, and you get to see that process.
Yeah, that's
you get to see. That's fascinating, and stuff like that.
In this part, they do a lot of that because John mid-song is going, I like Roadhog better than, and he writes it down, and I want that piece of paper.
So they get that day ends. We go to the next day, and we start that day with we start that day in the film with a Paul McCartney songwriting lesson. And young studio fellow Paul Bond seems to be basically losing his shit while Paul is playing Martha, My Dear. He doesn't like Freak, but you could see his face just going, I am sitting here leaning on the piano, and Paul is playing Martha, My Dear. Like the expression on this guy, Paul Bond's face is like, what is going on? Which is really fun.
Can I just cut in 1 minute before that? Before that, Peter Sellers comes in and they're talking, and I'm not going to talk about
Peter Sellers is after that.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is.
Go ahead then.
No, it's okay.
I apologize.
No, it's all right. Ringo shows up, and they go into bought a piano, which we know from Let It Be, which is fun. Ringo's
that's a great
and then Ringo is mouthing and doing this popping stuff while Paul is talking about woman. So again, it's just a cool segment in the film for Beatle fans and for fans of 60s music, for Paul to be talking about woman and the two arrangements of woman, the one that didn't come out and the one that did. And then you get to see Ringo behind the camera, which is kind of cool, considering his future as a director. And then there's where you were saying a little before Peter Sellers arrived, still, there's that great question about songwriting from Paul Bond, where he says, well, how do you just write the song? Did you just, and Paul says, I wrote this morning, backseat of my car. Look, what the hell,
The guy farts out songs.
He farts out songs.
I swear to God, it's a great thing, though.
And they smell like flowers.
In the dirt.
And they smell like money is what they smell like.
Yeah.
Anyway,
much more like money.
He plays an unreleased little thing called Song of Love, which is bizarre, interesting. And then John and Yoko are shown doing the Canadian TV interview. Now, again, talking about John recovering from the night before, he comments about it, and we have the footage from the CBC of John mid interview getting up to go throw up and coming back. And at the time when that footage, surfaced, it was among the most depressing footage. But at least you know that the rest of the day was much better for Mr. Lennon.
Much better.
And then they're joking around, they're making their imaginary movie. Paul up on the chains, and then there's a funny bit. Paul climbs up the chains, and they get him up the chains, and they're hoisting him in there. And then Ringo just goes, "All right, that's a wrap."
Yeah,
and pretends that they're leaving. So that's actually a very funny little bit.
Again, they're they're in their 20s.
Yeah.
You know, we keep forgetting that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in their 20s and they're all having a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
Ringo seems to have so much fun in this movie. Just when he sometimes he just smiles at the camera and you say, you know what he's thinking. You know, it's not like John, where John, goes sometimes overboard with the too smart comments. Ringo just looks like he's just having this great time, and at the same time, he's observing like we are in many ways.
Yeah, but wait till part 3 when all gas must pass.
Nice.
You know what I mean?
Very nice. Then you get that point where just John makes that comment about asking Ringo what religion means to him, which is an unusual thing. And then enter Peter Sellers. And Mitch, you had a comment of
no, I was just going to say, I mean, that part, I mean, again, it's a little quabble here. I mean, do we need that?
No.
There's nothing about that. Like he just comes in and goes, "Hi guys," and sits down and he says, "What are we talking about now?" Like, I don't think stuff like that could have been edited out. I think they kept it in Peter Sellers. But John sitting, whether it was with Peter or after Peter Sellers, is hysterical. John tells the Boy Scout joke, which
that's hysterical.
Oh my God. I laughed out loud.
But it was very odd that Peter Sellers was, and I get it, at this point they're the Beatles. Peter Sellers implies it's nice to have met you. We know Peter knew Ringo. Do we know whether or not Peter knew the other three? Because
he did A Hard Day's Night, in 64 or whatever, when he did his own
George
version.
Martin. So
It's been a hard day. You're right. But
so
I don't know if he had known the other three
before. Peter Sellers had his own issues, so we don't know.
We don't know what state he was in. But what's odd is that here they are in a room with kind of one of their idols.
Yeah, a goon.
And John is being, I won't say disrespectful, but John is being just completely,
John is being John. He's not
nonplussed.
Disrespectful. I don't think he was. I think he was just being John.
I'm saying I don't know. And I think that scene might have gone differently had John not been recovering from the night before.
Maybe. Yes.
Yeah.
I think we would have had John doing, John doing some of the John
faces.
Gooning. I think we would have had John Gooning. And it seems like Peter Sellers is just trying to make sense of all of this, and he absolutely does not.
Chance the Gardener showed up. Come on.
Right, exactly.
I mean, he didn't say anything. It's like, it's almost Chance the Gardener. I thought of that when he shows up. I go, he didn't say anything. It's like Chance the Gardener.
We have to reference that it's from Being There, the movie.
Being There, which he's thought of as a genius because he says, monosyllable. No, not monos. He says silly things, basically.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks he's so smart and wise.
Well, his final thing is, nice to have met you. And he gets up and John with the comment about the needles, which is bizarre. But
yeah, again, that might be, like you said, maybe different if he wasn't.
But anyway, you bring it up, and there's a line in there that before we get to the they died that we might wank line,
funny though,
where Paul says, wandering aimlessly is unhip. Which I almost want a bumper sticker that says that wandering aimlessly is unhip. It's just a great line. But anyway, so you're talking about the Boy Scout.
But then again, he's the guy who wrote Two of Us. Come on.
Yeah.
There you go. Right. Anyway.
But the Boy Scout joke was just, and Yoko says, "What about it?" Just something like that. And he says, "Oh, well, they can't masturbate, especially when wearing shorts. It's hard to masturbate when you're wearing pants." He goes, I think
he says that they find it hard to not masturbate, especially because they're wearing shorts.
Because they're wearing shorts, right? And he says, you won't go blind, but you'll be short-sighted.
You'll be very short-sighted.
And then he just looks in the camera and you just like, that's the John we know.
So then we have Madman come in for a bit, and that's the first time. Is that the first time we're hearing Madman? I can't remember.
Yeah, but I want to just one thing. I think right before they moved to Apple, and where they're all coming into the studio to the song Madman, which is a great song, by the way. I love it.
Well, Madman is introduced here on this day.
Yeah. But I think they talk to the fans first, the two girls, before they come in. Yeah, because I think the girls say, we just want to see them. We don't care. We just want to see them. But what's great is that they ask them, what do you think about Yoko? And 1969, girls, and we have to remember, girls were fawning when going crazy and fainting when, Paul got married and because they thought they were going to marry him. These two girls are like two of the hippest girls because they say, what does it matter? It shouldn't matter to any of us if they love each other. And the interviewer actually says, good answer. Yeah. And it is. It's very important because everybody always says, the public all perceived her as the Dragon Lady, but no, they're fans based on these two, again, small sample, but these two were pretty with it.
But also, think about it. John had been with Yoko for 7 months, 8 months. So there's not maybe enough time to get to dislike her because that's the.
Haven't had any time to hate her yet. It's very nice.
Well, no, also the British press had started going after him. Also, so
I don't know about that though, Rob. When was Life with the Lions? When was the
68?
Yeah.
Or 69.
When was Two Virgins?
Two Virgins was 68.
Yeah.
And then but Life with the Lions, I mean, she had the miscarriage and there was, but you saw even the comment from Housego when they talk about, that basically the Beatles have all gotten weird. But no, Life with the Lions is.
You should say Housego is the writer who wrote the article they kept reading.
Yeah, and it was recorded in when is it? November of 68, released in May of 69. So she had the miscarriage, had been in the hospital, and the press had already kind of been on top of them and beaten them down a little bit. So
what I liked about that scene in front of Apple, for some reason
we're not there yet.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Well, no, actually, no, we're not on the rooftop, but there's something.
No, we're not at Apple yet.
Well, I thought we were at Apple. The girls are in front of Apple.
No, Mitch jumped ahead.
Oh, okay.
Let's quickly.
I didn't realize we were doing scene by scene.
No, but we're just day by day at least. There's very importantly, there's the meeting with George that is successful. We can't let that happen. We got right back to Apple and we haven't got George back yet. Anyway, skipping part of the scene here. Again, there are the provisos. The live TV special has now been abandoned. We're getting out of Twickenham. Obviously, this was effective, which is great.
But George goes back to Twickenham to meet with
Glenn. Yeah, with Glenn. Anyway, so cut. The next day is their last day at Twickenham. Paul comes in, records a demo for "Oh Darling," with Glenn Johns, which is fascinating.
Obviously showered because he looked. Yeah. No, I don't mean it.
No, but he looked.
But he looks very. He looks like the Beatle mop top.
Yeah.
So you could tell he was showered.
And then I love this. George shows up to meet with Glenn for them to go see the new studio. And ta-da! We must add our hero in this episode, George Martin, to the rescue. They show up. They look at Magic Alex Margers's studio, quote unquote, which was fraud, and just basically a bunch of like beeps and farts and lines going like this and distortion and noise and what a mess. So we'll call EMI. We'll get some stuff. George's 8-track is moved from Twickenham to Apple. Again, I am a little bit frustrated at the fact that the one day when I think the magic wand is the fairy dust is sprinkled over the Beatles is day 11, Monday, the day that, as Mitch is saying, the interview with the Apple Scruffs, but that's the day that cameras are not allowed inside.
Right.
But as you hear later, they said it was a very productive day.
Very productive day. And there's a great comment, and I'll get to it later, but somebody says, Mal says right at the beginning, on Tuesday, when they finally are in Apple, they're again, God bless Mal with the big smile. George Martin's talking about, are we going to be getting rid of these mics? Maybe not, George. But Mal says you guys could have gone on, and like he sort of interrupted, but he was implying you could have gone on all night. They wrapped up at 7, but obviously it was good. And George's comment is good vibes.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah. Well, also I want to just take one thing I want to just bring up. It's right before they do the little Mad Men song. John talks to the camera, and he's doing it in his own right type of material, just talking, and it actually goes on for a while, and it almost could be considered like one of his poems from the book, the way he was presenting it. And I really, it didn't get a title or anything, so I assume it's just considered chat. But I really thought that section, which is like a minute or a minute and a half, could have been considered, something for one of John's books, because the way he was presenting it, it wasn't just like, saying a couple of words. There seemed to be like he just was on a roll about the presentation of it. And, whether that was the idea or not, I don't know. But I got that sense that he, it was nice to see, something that in his own right phase of his life, because, he only did 2 books, really.
Is that on that day, Rob? Or is that, because I know later he says something about the blind dog who creeps away in across my underpants?
No, it's right in the movie. It's right before they do Mean Mr. Mustard into Mad Men. There's a little section right before that. I think that comes a bit later, but it's all right. But that's I mean, John's you're right about John's persona is definitely but anyway, they've officially now scrapped the TV show. We get that little bit of Yoko asking George Martin about how to go buy a score, which is kind of cool. Piano score, which is neat. But I like that Peter Jackson went out of his way to present that Housego article and to have the Beatles themselves debunking the myths that we all heard about. From, did John and George ever come to fisticuffs? That was like the big question. Right. Nobody knew, did it ever really happen? And who knows? But now here they are at the time being confronted with the myth and basically blowing it out of the water, like totally blowing it out of the water. Well, John got up and put up his Duke, so to speak.
That was,
we know it was false. Yeah, it was a joke.
Yeah, screwing around.
Yeah.
And then it comes the first time that George is asked to intro the Stones for the circus.
You mean John was asked?
John, sorry. What did I say?
You said George.
Oh yeah, John was asked to introduce the Stones for the circus,
which became a running joke throughout the whole part.
Through the whole rest.
But you know what, Tony? Let me just say one thing. You mentioned George Martin and Yoko. I want to just say the first part we said, George Martin wasn't really part of it. I have to say that Peter Jackson also went to the trouble of showing George Martin talking to, I believe, Paul, forgive me if I'm wrong, saying, because someone was, or maybe Ringo, saying something to the effect of, no, I don't want to take over. Glenn should finish what he started.
Right. Yeah.
But, and that's important because we sit there and we say, where was George Martin and all? Yes, he rescued them by getting all the equipment into Apple, which we'll discuss. But we all said, where is George Martin in this? He's like a spectator. And later we find out he's only the A&R man. But no, but
I took that differently though. Watching it the second time, I took it kind of as,
all right,
the way they were calling Brian Mr. Epstein.
Oh, okay.
George Martin started out as their A&R man. That's who he was. Yeah. And at this point, truthfully, don't forget, he wasn't producing the sessions.
Right.
But no matter what, that's our A&R man. That's our guy.
I just think it's important that people know, and people, if you're going to watch it again, maybe you've seen it a million times, maybe you didn't notice this, or maybe you did, because I did and I didn't in the first time I watched it. But they definitely, Peter Jackson makes the point to show that George Martin was saying, hey, I know my place here right now, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because he helped out at the end too. I mean, he's in part the whole time. So, and he's a big help in part two, but I thought that was an important part of the part.
And it also shows the character of George Martin. He could have said, hey, your A&R guy is back. What's Glenn Johns doing? He has to leave soon anyway.
So,
and we're in Apple. This is my territory.
Now,
right. So, that's part of it.
So Captain Kirk is now kicking Jean-Luc out of the chair and getting back in. Anyway, but there's that whole thing with John reading the paper and the music being played over it.
But they're all laughing and having fun.
They're all laughing and having fun, which is interesting because then later when Paul does it, it goes on for way too long.
Yeah.
But anyway, and they go through Magic Alex's new invention.
Oh my goodness!
The bass and guitar flip around thing, which I laugh over the fact Paul just doesn't even. I don't think Paul even wanted to touch it. No part of it.
They all were laughing at it.
They were just horsing around about it.
Tell them to make a prototype.
Yeah, I mean, it was just completely, But after that, Paul starts going into the whole mock show thing. And basically talking about Germany and how they were playing live in Germany, and then they go into the oldies, which is cool. Another thing that's kind of fun and cool is you get that bit with Paul playing drums really badly, and then you go to Ringo horsing around on bass. But then Paul is actually going over and showing him a couple little bass things.
It appears that way.
But it's kind of fun. And all I could think of was, I don't play bass because that's too hard for me. It's like the only thing I could think of on that. But we get Paul reading the paper not exactly met with the same amusement as John singing Good Rockin' Tonight.
I want to talk about that for a second because it's important. I think, and I think, Tony, again, we've talked about it offline. I think it's important to leave in there. It gets embarrassing because it's not as fun when he does it as when John did it, because John was like screaming it, Beatles, George Harrison, and they were playing and laughing. And when Paul did it, they were playing already. And so Paul's just, in the mic going, and the Beatles. But I think, so it went on, like you said, a little too long. I understand why. Yes, but here's why it's important. It's important because of the content of the article he's reading.
Definitely.
He's reading an article about how the Beatles they need each other and that they're breaking up and that they have to realize, or they have realized that they are one, I'm paraphrasing, that they're one group, they need each other. And so I think the importance of the content is what kept that scene in there, because if not, it's unnecessary, because John did the same shtick. But John did it with George's arrest article. Yeah. Paul did it with an article about the four of them needing each other. And I think that was really important that they kept that in. Even though, again, it wasn't as funny. It was just boring. Yeah. But after hearing the content, I know why they left it in.
Yeah. Yeah. They go through as probably as long a take of a song as we've gotten yet in the episodes. And they go through a Dig a Pony. They start talking about the question of what is Four to the Bar, which is kind of interesting for these musicians who are the most successful group in music history, and they're reviewing the idea. Wait a minute, now what's Four in a Bar? Four to the Bar again, which is interesting. Madman pops in again. You get Madman. You get I've Got a Feeling. You got Don't Let Me Down, and then the moment that I love more than anything else, I love foreshadowing. John comes out with that line, we need somebody else. We need somebody who just plays keyboard. And then he does his Dickie Murdoch thing. And then she came in through the bathroom window, and John finally the line, we just need one more in the group, which is great.
I'm glad they showed the Dickie Murdoch thing, because I didn't know who he was.
No idea. I've heard that audio for years. Didn't know what that was.
But I wanted to say one thing right before that. I told you, Tony, when the Beatles are playing in Apple for the first time, minus Paul, he hadn't come in yet. It's such a different atmosphere. And then Paul comes in, and it closes the circle. And I mean that in a really good way.
Literally and figuratively.
He doesn't, announce. He just comes in, takes off the jacket, picks up his bass, sits down, and it's the Beatles again. I mean, George is happy. Yeah. Paul looks happy. John is definitely happy. And Ringo's always happy. So, but I mean, it was a moment of like, if you could have a Monty Python, like, how they show God in Monty Python, the Holy Grail, yes, you open up and it would be like, here you are, guys, again. And that's where part 2 really takes off.
Agreed.
It really does.
It does.
Yeah.
I have to say, parts of the beginning, I don't want to say are sad, but they're not as, I'm looking for, what do we hear about this whole thing so far? Oh, the Beatles are happy and they're laughing and all. Beginning of part 2 doesn't have that as much. It sort of starts in the middle of part 2, and it's something I was expecting more. I expected, part 1 to be all happy, and I was kind of disappointed by that, and
you had to be honest.
Yeah, it has to be honest, and that's the thing. But part 2 is, it didn't start until about halfway through, when all of a sudden we realized what's going on, that these songs are starting to get down, are working, and then all of a sudden it's the Beatles.
Right. Now, to toss an interwoven idea out there, Michael Lindsay Hogg was producing a theatrical film at a time when a theatrical music documentary was not going to go over 90 minutes. Let's be real. And, we hadn't gotten to the last waltz yet. So Michael Lindsay Hogg's taking all that footage to put together a 90-minute presentation of this whole time period. And, we talk about the idea that, well, all right, that movie then was edited with an agenda.
Yeah.
But the truth was, if the film had come out when the Beatles had broken up, which it did, or, we're on the verge, whatever.
Yeah.
Would it been realistic for Michael Lindsay Hogg to have pulled all of this footage of them being happy and playing like a tight band? It watching this part again made me, just sort of go, yeah, okay. The movie was, I will stick to my guns. The movie was edited with an agenda. But when it came to Michael Lindsay Hogg doing what he had to with all this footage and getting it down to 90 minutes, not 7 hours,
right?
90 minutes. What do? You show,
well,
you either show the Beatles, miserable. Oh, right. The original cut was how long? Almost 3 hours. Yeah, it was 3 hours. Still, in 3 hours, could you have told the whole story, and would you have wanted to? I mean, I guess, right, it hit so many delays. Had it come out earlier, before they broke up and before the news of Alan Klein, who knows?
Talking about 1970 to 2021.
Yeah.
It's great to do this movie in hindsight, as Peter Jackson did.
Exactly. He was able to do.
In the time, it may have been the right movie to make, the 81 minute or whatever it was, 88 minutes, whatever.
88.
In that time frame, in that time period, it might have. Now that we look back 50 years later, we say, okay, Peter Jackson's cut is the truth. But,
right.
He could have, though, honestly, Michael Lindsay Hogg could have, he showed them the movie. There's pictures of them watching the movie.
And there apparently, too, unlike Peter Jackson, Michael Lindsay Hogg was getting different notes from people saying, no, take out this part, take out this bit.
Yep.
Yeah,
so he was getting pushed around a little too.
He was.
No, he could have shown happy parts. What would the public have cared? Okay, the Beatles broke up. All right, it showed them breaking up.
At least they knew At least we knew that they were happy for a while
before they broke up. Right.
So interesting point.
Who knows? I mean,
that's why the rooftops at the end of the movie, and not the
of course
the thing that happened on the 31st where they went into the studio and they record the softer songs.
Right.
You have to end it with, thank you on the behalf of the group, and we hope we pass the audition. That has to be the last line of the movie.
Yeah.
So even though chronologically it wasn't in order, as we didn't know that at the time when we first started to watch it, but you know what? That's how it ends, because finally they're playing these songs pretty well.
I would have loved if the original movie ended with the rooftop, and then over as they're playing the credits, you just hear John say, after 40 years in the desert, he couldn't find his balls. He says that out of the movie.
That is a great line. But
great.
the cool thing now, as we get into Apple, is I won't go as strict in chronology because we're going on and on, which is fine. But, I love George and John talking about Fleetwood Mac. That's kind of cool. And then they break into going up the country. I love hearing them talking about other bands, other music that they like, that they dig.
Well, they showed the Smokey Robinson, the Miracles album.
Yeah.
And
coming through all the albums.
And Beggar's Banquet was part of a pile of records they had.
And you got to hope somewhere that Mick Fleetwood and John McVie are being told by their friends, guys, did you see the documentary yet? And just,
But I love also, by the way, is, and this is earlier and very telling too, and I forgot to mention it. There's a part where they talk more about Jimmy Nicol.
Oh, yeah.
But in the beginning of this part, or the beginning of maybe the beginning of the part, Paul says Ringo ever, Eric never.
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of telling considering George was not back yet.
Right.
Yeah.
They suggested having Eric.
Yeah.
And I forgot to mention that in the beginning. Well, it is kind of like, they must have been thinking about it.
Yeah.
Not thinking about having Eric, but, squashing the idea, I don't know why he said Ringo ever, Eric never, but, I just thought, and again, they go back to the Beatles, this whole thing. I mean, we get so many Beatles songs.
So many Beatles flashbacks during this.
My goodness.
That was fun stuff, them talking about their past, which is only 7 to 8 years before.
Yeah. They then wrap a little bit about, they talk about Martin Luther King a little bit. I love when they talk about decorating the studio and they talk about the gold records, and John says, well, you have to get them all back from Mimi.
You got to kick them off Mimi's walls.
You got to take them off Mimi's walls, which is great. Well, then, George is talking with them about the uniqueness of recording live versus and how they would have to get the songs all together rather than add things in the studio as they had. And that's a really nice way to explain to people who are not familiar with the world of recording what it really means to be doing this project the way they're doing it. George sums up that idea of we would take the song and we'd add things in the studio that would flesh the song out and make it what we want it to be. But here we've got to have it all ready to go because, right. And then now here's my moment when, then Billy Preston walks in the room.
Yeah.
Yep.
And not
good night. Thanks, everybody.
Called him.
What's that?
Not because they called him. He stopped by, not knowing that they need. I mean, talk about fate.
Now, we should say that it has always been a lot of myth that George had bumped into him and asked him. Or we just, and the truth is there could be poker faces involved.
Correct.
And maybe that did happen. We're going to assume that everything we're seeing in the film is honest and right. Upfront, and there's no bullshit. So no one had expected Billy Preston to show up and say hi.
Well, there were two things right before that. A little bit before that, John had talked about, well, maybe we'll bring in Nicky Hopkins.
Yeah.
And that would have been different than having Billy Preston. First of all, Billy gets signed to Apple. Do they sign Nicky Hopkins, first of all? And second of all, Tony, as soon as he walks in, they gave him hugs. They say hello. And he sits down. He starts playing. Holy crap, the song gets so filled out.
Paul's face. My favorite moment in the 8 hours is Paul's face when Billy hits the first notes of Don't Let Me Down.
Yep. And it's like, holy crap. It's like, this is what is missing. And it didn't seem so simple to think about it until Billy got there. It's like, holy crap. And he doesn't even know the song, basically. No, it's like, okay, it's in F sharp. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And boom.
And John says, immediately looks and goes, you're in the group.
Yeah. That was so cool.
Like, you're in the group.
I love that.
It was great because, you know what? I mean, and they say to him, well, get him some tapes, let him hear it, And they didn't even ask him yet. They just, someone said,
George says,
be here. Yeah. And John goes, yeah, he's going to be. Well, I think actually Glenn probably says, is Billy staying?
He's the guy he says he's the guy that solves a lot, John says. And John is psyched about the movie now all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Now he's re-psyched about the movie. And
the energy level goes way up.
One of the things I love about it is that Billy is a cat who is, look, George Martin works with them, but and Glenn Johns is too, in a way, because of around the Beatles. But Billy is a guy who knows them as a live band.
Right.
He knows what they're capable of as a live act. So he sits down at the keyboard and he doesn't have to know about any of the shit that was going on for all the days before. Billy sits down at the keys and he's like, oh, it's the Beatles. These cats know how to jam. And just pushes them because his expectations is that he is sitting in a room with the Beatles. It's not the guys who have been, muddling for the last 2 weeks and the guys that are having a lot of infighting and, oh man, I'm hanging with the Beatles. These guys rock. Let's do some tunes.
Well, also there was one, and I'm going to jump ahead on this, but you have to fit in with this, what you just said. There's like a day or two later, he's just watching the band and Paul says, is everything okay? And he goes, oh, I'm just watching, man. Like he's having the time of his life watching the Beatles work on songs. And there was such a great core of musicianship with when they get the five together for what they were doing. Now, maybe it doesn't work for Abbey Road. I mean, he played I Want You, She's So Heavy and supposedly on something. But, he didn't stay around for the Abbey Road album either. So, for what they were doing with this music, I mean, Tony, when he starts playing "Don't Let Me Down," like you said, man,
brilliant.
It just filled it in so perfectly. It was just so great. I felt so happy. Yeah, at this point in the show, this is where I start to get happy about this whole part two.
Well, also, George and John say, "Hey, Paul, did you hear that we signed Billy?" Like they're so excited. Oh, we gave him a contract.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's like, wow. Yeah. That's. They're very excited about it. Oh, yeah.
Well, also, if you look at the credits, the stuff that Billy plays on, it says the Beatles and Billy Preston as the artists.
That's cool.
Which was I was so really, it's even some of the goofing around stuff they were doing. It's like, wow, that is that blues thing they were doing at one point towards the end.
Yeah.
And
fun.
And Billy's playing on it. But it says the Beatles and Billy Preston. I mean, they didn't give him a songwriting credit, but they did give him a playing credit, which was great.
And much like a scene in a happy scene in The Wizard of Oz when everyone is singing and dancing and we're all having a groovy time. Just all of a sudden, the Wicked Witch of the West just shows up for like 20 seconds as they we're going to meet with Alan Klein tomorrow. Dun, dun, dun. We're having a great time. Billy's playing. Well, we rock. Well, the Beatles are so great. We're meeting with Alan Klein tomorrow. Dun, dun, dun.
Busy Friday. No, Monday we'll see him. And you're like, if I could go back in time and go in the movie and go, don't go.
Jeez, Tony, it's more foreshadowing. And the funny thing about it is, if this was shown at the fest, like they used to show Let It Be, and people would boo. Depending on the crowd, would boo either Yoko or Linda.
And cheering Linda. Yeah.
So if this is being shown at the fest or a group of people like all of a sudden Alan Klein, boo.
That would be very funny.
That would be funny. So anyway, the next day, and I'm only going chronological because the next day is the Yoko Jam. With Paul and John and Yoko and Billy. And I love when, the George comes in, he says, I felt it coming up the stairs.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if he pulled the audio from somewhere else. I don't know, but there's that really funny bit where Paul goes, I think you're nuts, the paria, which is just, I don't know if he pulled it right from that moment or if it's from later, but it's just, it's cute actually.
Well, you heard what John said.
Yellow Submarine, by the way.
What's that?
In Yellow Submarine, that's the paria.
The paria.
Well, what did John say after he goes, well, I'd like to put that on the record.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
No. He says, I'd like to put it on her record or on our record. I don't think he meant our Beatles. I think he meant our John and Yoko.
Oh, John and
Yoko. I thought he meant our, meaning the Beatles.
Okay, whichever way you want to take it. I'll
Yoko. That's fun. I like the fact that there's a bit during, there's a little montage during one of the songs, and you get this shot of George band leading. You get the shot of George very clearly showing the other two, do this. Let's do this, which is great.
Well, Tony, I think the point that we have to make about George is that he must have said, they must have said to him, listen, if we're gonna acquiesce and say no special, and do it in Apple, you got to be happy. Now, they may have said that, they may not have. That he may have said, if you do this, I'll be happy, and
right. If
it naturally,
right. Can we do this?
Can we compromise and everybody will be happy?
Right.
But one great thing about this whole part, and it happens toward the end, and I have to just say it now because again, in context, and Rob, you mentioned it earlier, George is the one who said, I love this. I think it should be the single for Get Back.
Right.
Not Paul, not John. Yep. George says it. And George doesn't even have a solo on it.
And I think we should get it out right away.
Right away. And he said that would be great. And there's a lot of that in this. Like when they're doing Two of Us, George says, that's very lovely now. I mean, you hear it. So you hear the enthusiasm very much by George in this.
Well, they were listening to him, and that maybe he realized they were listening to him, especially with that scene where they're playing Get Back, and John's, they're saying, okay, Billy's going to take a solo here, and John, you take a solo, and then they're saying, maybe there should be a third solo, but George is being listened to along the way there, and I think that's part of it too, because
very much.
Part of being in a band is just, hey, listen to me occasionally. So. And
then at one point, I think Paul actually says, yeah, you're right. Something like that. I forgot which part it was.
Yeah, but there was George was happier in this segment than the first segment. He doesn't have that anger like burning up in his head where you think his head's going to explode.
Well, think about what the Beatles did to get him back.
Right.
I mean, they moved everything. They had to set up a makeshift studio in a place that wasn't supposed to be a studio. Let's face it, the Beatles never recorded there again.
Nope.
So,
they all comment on how good it sounds at points.
Yes, but they never recorded there again. No. So, they stopped the live show. I mean, which was the point of the whole thing. I mean, and get him back. So they really wanted him back. And you know what? I think he understood what they gave up, what they sacrificed.
Yes.
And he was very happy in to be heard and to be wanted enough, because the Beatles could have said, listen, we're doing the live show whether you want it or not. We're going to bring in Clapton. And if it went like that, it went like that. But they needed him and they wanted him.
And I think it also... I'm sorry, Mitch. What was that the last line you said?
No, I said, even though we weren't there to hear the conversations, I'm sure, he felt wanted after, them acquiescing to a lot of his demands, so to speak. I say demands. I don't mean it like a list.
Yeah. But I also think that George, I don't know, there's a certain aspect to him that, like we were talking about in the last episode, he could have continued with the Beatles and done a solo album. In his mind, he was perfectly capable of doing that. And I think that part of walking away from that whole situation, I'm not saying that there's no chance that he wouldn't have come back, but I think what he wanted was, we've got to change the situation, and then I'll come back and we'll be the Beatles again. I have no problem walking away from the Beatles, doing a solo record, and then coming back, but not to this. I'm not going to come back to this. This is bad. So, so anyway, now they throw out the idea of Billy actually joining as a member at one point, which is fun. Billy becomes a Beatle. George says, I could ask Dylan, and Paul with the great line, look, it's bad enough with 4 of us.
Well, yeah, but they make the suggestion. They're all like, well, it could be the Beatles and company. And just have everybody. And
George says, or Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club.
He said it a lot like Sergeant Pepper, right?
Which is very funny. And I'm very happy that George gets his tie. He wanted that black tie, and not only just George gave him a Paul, but John gets one too, which is really nice. But I mean, I don't know, other parts of the thing that you guys want to highlight or talk about, or
if you don't mind. There are 2 things. George and George Martin are talking about. George says, "Hey, how's your company going? Your studio going?" And they say, it's very also telling. He says, "Well, it could be called." John says, "Well, it could be called Apple." And he goes, "Yeah, but it won't be like ours. Is your Apple rotten or disintegrating like ours, something paraphrasing.
No, it hasn't disintegrated like ours.
Like ours, yeah.
He said that to George Martin.
The other thing is, and this is really kind of cool from Paul, he's very unsure about how they're doing the project until Glenn and Michael and Ziog talk to him privately about the roof. Then he perks up again. But, he says clearly to the band members, if we were going to do a theatrical thing, we should have done it on 35 millimeter. And he says, because we did it on 16 and blowing that up is going to be horrible. I mean, how right was he?
In advance.
No, but Paul,
guys, 50 years from now, this fellow Peter Jackson's going to come along. He's going to be able to blow up all this footage. No, I'm sorry.
No, but I mean, for Paul to say that and be aware of that, that's damn astute of him. I mean, how the hell would he know that? He was
farting around with the idea of filmmaking. I mean, and he was talking about.
There's no way you know about the format like that and how you blow it up.
Carnival of Light, man. Who knows? He was
some of those fancy pantsy schmancy guys in London that he was hanging out with. They were doing films, and he probably picked up on it.
Magical Mystery Tour, guys. I mean, Paul was.
That was shot on 16, though.
I know, but I'm just saying he probably saw what amazing that was. Yeah,
it's amazing that he said that. And now, I mean, how many times have we said the film's blurry?
Yeah.
And Paul was right.
Yeah. There are even shots in this where you can see some blurriness. You can see some pixelation.
Yeah, definitely.
There are definitely moments where faces, details are not perfect.
It has to do with the 4K. When you do the 4K, then you knock it down. If you're going to show it in the theater, it's one thing. If you're going to do it for video, obviously you can't do two versions, but that's what happens.
That's no good. Two versions that came out in 1968.
Yeah. Well, that's a no good. When they made the movie Oklahoma, they made a 65 millimeter and a 70 millimeter, and they did two different versions. So, back in the 50s. I don't know if you guys knew that.
What do you call it? There's we said that there's a lot of Beatling around. The Beatle medley is fun.
Yeah.
Because what I loved about it also is that while John is doing Help and Paul is obviously having fun with it, they showed George, and I was watching George while watching it again just to see how he reacts. And he's laughing the whole time while playing Help and Please, Please Me. But even John at one point just comes out with a line from I'll Get You.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm in love with you. It's easy because I know. It's like, oh my God, It as much as we all say, "Oh, John was in a stupor," and he came out
less than a stupor in this.
No, correct, and that's what I'm saying. But
the whole thing,
he really, I mean, all the Beatle references around the Beatles again. Ringo talking about around the Beatles.
Yeah, we played that rock stuff great, and then
and he said we watched it again the other night.
Great.
We heard it watch, and Linda
heard the acetate.
Says we watched Help and A Hard Day's Night the other night. And he goes, that's the Beatles. I was like, wow, Paul was watching Help, in 1969.
No, filmmakers there. One thing I liked, there was a quote of John's where he goes, do it. He goes to the rest of the band, do it like the Beatles would. You know what? That is such a true statement, because when they were together, they played differently than when they played with other people. We know this.
Correct.
And I just looked at it like, it's such a self-acknowledgement of their friendship and their talents together that, that they have. Some groups have it, some people don't.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a great line. It was, and he said it so nonchalantly, as many of the lines from John in the movie are, So I thought that was pretty cool. And also the thing I liked also, when they were talking about Martin Luther King, they were talking about him as a poet. Not just, civil rights guy, but they were talking about how his stuff had a rhythm to it as poetry.
What does he make a comment like Langston Hughes? Does he say that? Or
I don't know if he said Langston Hughes, but he just said
something. He compares him to another poet. And says
I didn't say that he could be president.
Yeah, that he says. Yeah, he'd be president.
So it was nice to hear that they identify him, because a lot of times you hear the I Have a Dream thing that was on a bootleg before it. you're only hearing parts of it, and now you're understanding that this isn't being making fun of him. They're recognizing his talents, not just as a civil rights leader, but as a poet.
And I think I may be wrong, but I think I remember reading something about them saying there had been a documentary aired about King on the BBC that week or something. And
that was that.
Was that it? I thought there was something about either some sort of story about.
He just said, I think I'm not.
No. They don't mention it in this special.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What I'm saying, I think I remember that the reason why King was coming up was because there had been something about King. There had been some tribute or something that had been done.
Yeah, it could have been. I mean,
and he came up.
One thing I liked about the first part was, George was talking about watching something on TV, and then they actually showed some clips, and they showed what it was. So, there's a certain filling in of some of this, like spackling a wall.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this makes a little more sense now.
And then it's interesting too, because you've got Billy Preston, a black keyboard player, he's a black keyboard player, a black gentleman who's their keyboard player and playing with them. And when he starts doing the I Had a Dream, and obviously doing it in Martin Luther King's, you see Billy just kind of gets this smile, like, that's pretty cool. Like, that's all right. This is an important, thing. And the guys are, flying it into the music. And that seemed kind of cool. Billy seemed very into that when he started doing it during the song. But
by the way, if this was a movie, not a documentary, Billy Preston would be nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Totally.
I mean, no, you think about it. It's like, this is where
Michael Lindsay Hogwood.
Well, he might be too. I don't know, but Billy coming in just changes everything, and that's what Best Supporting Actors do. They're not in the whole movie, but they come in and they change the pace of the whole movie.
Well, it's literally like a buddy of mine said that if this movie had been a baseball game, it would have been basically just like, and coming in on keyboards, Billy Preston.
Hitting for everybody.
Yeah, and a home run, and that's it. Game over.
I mean, you know what? It ends in a happy way. Part 2. It ends in a way where we now, instead of, it's such a difference 180 from the first one, where we don't know if the Beatles are going to exist, to the Beatles are having fun, and they say everything is they even comment everything is going so well now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is and then obviously what part 3 is going to be.
Right.
I haven't seen it yet. What happens? Do they finish and do that concert?
No, they fall off the roof. We must say,
Whoa! Get Up and Go. While Get Up and Go is playing.
I'm very sorry to say this. I for all of you people who love MLH, not MLK, MLH, but we do see at the end, Bill, when they are on the roof, Paul and Mal Evans are dragging Michael Lindsay.
Yeah. It's a humorous bit. It is
funny.
Bit.
Come on. I mean, even if you like him or don't like him, that's funny.
It's a funny bit. Yeah.
With the cigar in his mouth.
Well, that was
his mouth. He's being dragged up on the roof.
Very, very funny. Well, like we said, we sort of, we end this.
Well, I got a couple of more things because
absolutely. But I'm just saying it is true how much happier this segment ends than that. Anyway.
Yes,
but go ahead.
The first, remember the two girls who were being interviewed in front of Apple?
Yes,
there was a scene either right before or right after that where the camera goes up to looks at the roof of Apple.
Yeah,
it's another foreshadowing thing, and I don't think it was done on purpose. It probably just needed to get out of the clip, and we'll just shoot up instead of shooting down. Yeah. But at the same time, it's Tony, the foreshadowing thing. The librarian, the book reader.
But a well-directed movie.
Right?
Well-directed
That's true.
The foreshadowing.
So also, where is it here? It was interesting that they played a little bit of Across the Universe and said, "Oh, that's going to be on the EP."
Yeah.
Yeah. And at that point, that Yellow Submarine EP was supposed to happen, and then it got taken away.
It's so funny because he said that, and my head went, I know about that. No, yeah, but it was like, I know this, but I'm gonna I've got to kind of, but of course the Yellow Submarine EP,
right? So
that's right. Wow.
That was the last thing they would have been their last EP and the last mono of that. They ended up on the Mono Masters. If that's why you're wondering why there's a mono version of Across the Universe, because it was part of that. And I really liked when they did 20 Flight Rock. I just, it's just, I know that means so much to John and Paul, or especially to Paul, but it sounded good too. You wish they'd finished it. Yes. Yeah. That's one of the problems with some of the songs they did. They'd do like the first verse and then say, oh, okay. It's like, no, finish it.
Oh, Bye Bye Love sounded good too.
Bye Bye Love sounded so good. But John and Paul do the Everly thing. It was so good.
But talk about bringing the Beatles full circle. With you do One After 909 and Fancy Me Chances, and the Thinking of Linking, but can you have imagined, them doing 20 Flight Rock in this as, well,
that would have been after hearing it, I could see that if they'd thought of putting some covers in this, which would have been cool, that would have been one of the choices, and Bye Bye Love would have been the other one. Definitely. That was so. You wish it just went a little bit longer, or you wish they'd done it for the BBC, something like that. So that was some of my favorite parts of the thing, where they're showing these oldies, and you just wish there was more of it. It was just really.
Do you know fun. Which one was omitted?
What do you mean?
Which was not shown?
No, which one?
You've Really Got a Hold on Me.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That would have been in this part, because it's not in part 3.
No, but you're right, and it would have been really kind of bad because
it wasn't a great version.
No, it wasn't
great. But and also too, look, let's face it, there isn't, other than the roof and Bought a Piano and a couple, there aren't a lot of things that are totally duplicated from Let It Be.
No, that's true. He said he wasn't going to try to copy any cuts.
Yeah. So
talk about duplication. This part had a couple of scenes which were duplicated. One of Ringo with the where he's showing his scarf and stuff. That they used it a couple of times in the beginning of this part.
Was it the exact same one, or was it from an alternate camera?
No, I think it was the exact same one.
I'm surprised he had so little copy from Let It Be.
Yeah.
So so that was part of it. They finally played I Lost My Little Girl, though not the 5-minute version.
No.
And I've always liked that version because I thought they played very well on it. And I'm like, well, why is this not on anything? Any release anywhere? And, maybe because John sang it and Paul always claimed it was his song. So that
doesn't matter.
I don't know. So anyway.
That's a really enjoyable part.
Oh, by the way, I have to say, when this is where, if you read something and someone writes it the wrong way or whatever, I liked when Paul called Glenn Johns fuckface.
That is very funny.
But it's totally in the moment when.
I know, it's told as a joke.
Bloody stars. You don't mess with this. You don't cut off stars.
Yeah. Like they were talking about we need more tape or something. This was like, it was just like it was shown as a laugh, and that's what it is.
It's shown as a laugh, but it's also fun too, because it's also reclamation. It's also kind of just like, hey, we're the Beatles. Don't mess,
which is kind of in a fun way, so they don't. It's not like they're assholes.
No, not at all. But it is kind of cool because the gestalt is back a little bit.
Yes.
So it's Paul going, hey, we're the fucking Beatles.
Well, John actually does it first with
John, right,
Bloody Stars.
Yeah, we're Bloody Stars, right?
Stars.
And but it's kind of fun that they're, anyway. So
this part was so wonderful.
I also like there was a line where John said, "I'd like to have a fifth Beatle." Well, I thought that was pretty cool. Where he was thinking, and maybe other bands have added people over the years.
Plastic Ono Band idea.
Yeah, that's
what that was.
Right.
Shout out to George Walsh.
There was one thing they were talking about India, where Paul was, and he was talking about how he saw the films that he had, and
Yeah.
And George asked him,
Yeah.
"Do you feel what was it? If Paul had any regrets going into India?" Now, since it was George's idea, really, it was interesting that Paul said no, but that he didn't ask John because John probably did have some regrets, as some of the stuff he's written. Yeah.
What was really cool about that, Rob, was that Paul comes out and says, "Oh, I saw the films last night."
Right.
And then, like you said, Rob, they fill it in.
Yep.
And at the end, they said they got the films from Paul.
Right. And well, also there's some John in there and Ringo. But it was interesting for someone who's never mentioned her ever, really, in an interview. Jane Asher is not only shown, but she's mentioned.
Yeah. But it's cool that he's talking and what he's saying then gets shown right away.
Yes, that is.
Yeah,
I love that.
Those camera pictures were fantastic.
Well,
those were amazing.
They didn't need to show that.
No, they didn't.
It's like, wow, I want those films. Where are those?
Right. So
bonuses on the DVD. Sorry.
And then you saw about the great story that Paul's always told about why don't we do it in the road? Yeah. And then they showed the two monkeys.
Going at it from the film. It was like, talk about the moment that a song is being conceived.
And I'm like, that was very cool to see that. I mean, like, what else can we do? Go into Paul's brain and take out the part that writes music. Here's Paul's brain part that writes the music.
But was that the same? Were those the same monkeys that inspired Everybody's Got Something to Hide except for me and my monkey?
That's something else. You're right.
I'm not going there.
Anyway.
And there was also another thing. It was just with George, and this is where it could have got sticky, and it didn't. They were talking about you should be yourselves. And George said, well, if we had to be ourselves, we wouldn't have had to gone to India. If we could be ourselves, we wouldn't have gone to India.
Yeah.
And I thought that was that was an interesting little quote, I thought, from George.
Yeah.
But that was referring to himself as well, certainly.
That's true. That's true. No, you're right about that. You're right about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like I said, Michael Lindsay Hogg, I didn't think was that annoying in this part of the movie, but he had to do what he had to do. And I like at the end where he like sort of whispers to Paul and then you see Paul start to smile, and they're like, "Okay, part 3 is coming." And it'd be better if they pushed Michael Lindsay Hogg off the roof. Maybe that would
instead of
like I said, see Ruddles anyway.
And I thought that the version in the credits of "Love Me Do."
Yeah.
It wasn't as bad as I thought I'd remembered.
No, I would have liked to have actually had that in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been nice to see them do it. They didn't do a bad version. It would have been nice if they tried that same arrangement, again, to just say, okay, that we actually could do something with that.
Well, they'd have to call Pete Best or Andy White.
Nice. All right. Well, I think on that note, we have been talking about Get Back Part 2, and obviously you can check out our YouTube page to see the talk up about Part 1 and Part 3. I imagine to come sometime very soon.
Very soon.
Yeah, the show is a Fab 4 Free for All, and again, thank you all for being here with us. I'm Tony Tugart. I've been your moderator for this evening. And joining me, as they do, is my good friend Mitch Axelrod.
Take care, folks.
And my good friend Mr. Rob Leonard.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
And we're recording Part 3 on the roof, right?
We're recording Part 3 on the roof. Yeah, what the hell?
Yes. You just don't know which roof.
Could be your house.
We're gonna it's a new contest.
Asylum.
New contest. We come to your house, you put us on the roof, and we'll do our show.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.